player claims for losses on the increase. What steps can operators take to minimize exposure? Moderated by Davinia, Cutajar, WH Partners. With Claus Hambach, Hambach and Hambach. Christian Rapani, Rapani. And Matthias Spitz, Melchers.
No, we're good to go. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to my panelists for joining today and giving us insights on this topic, which is very much on the minds of operators from Malta who operate in Austrian and German markets. With me today, I have Christian Rapani from Austria. Christian set up his firm in 2013 and specializes in business and corporate law, including iGaming. And I also have two lawyers from Germany, from two different firms. Matthias, who is an expert in AML and advertising regulation and implementation of new gaming products on the German market. And Claus Hambach, the co-founder and managing partner of Hambach in Munich, with 20 years of experience in gaming. Christian, I'm going to start with you, with the Austrian market. So in recent years, we've seen an avalanche of claims from players from Austria who are claiming back their gaming losses. Can you explain to us the legal aspects of this and how they are succeeding?
First of all, thank you for the kind introduction. The Austrian typical player claim, first of all, you need to distinguish between betting and games of chance in Austria. The typical player claim concerns games of chance offerings. The basic line of argumentation is that not Austrian licensed operators are lacking the necessary license. Therefore, their offering is illegal. The contract between operator and player is nil and void, and as a consequence, losses may be claimed back by the players. So that's the main legal framework we are in. In the past and still now, we think there are very valid arguments from European law that justify an offering without Austrian license, but at the same time, we also need to accept and to face more and more consistent case law in favor of players claiming back their losses.
Claus, would you say the situation is the same or similar in Germany?
It's very interesting what's happening in Austria. There are similarities, I would say, also in Germany, but looking at the legal arguments on one side and the procedural situation on the other side, there are also differences. So from the legal argumentation, I think it's similar insofar as the same argument applies. The players claim that there is no German license and the money has to be paid back. In this situation, we have a very special regulation in Germany that comes into place, which states that if both parties knew what they were doing, then you do not have to pay it back. So the player can ask back for his losses, but theoretically also the casinos could ask back for the winnings. They, of course, are not doing so. So it's very important to focus on this knowledge, and we have a lot of indications that the players knew exactly what they were doing. So you have in the terms and conditions a clear statement that every player has to look and check if everything is legal wherever he's located. We have a massive advertisement campaign from player lawyers. They set up websites, get your money back, DE, whatever advertisement they can do in order to get customers. And we have an enormous press coverage that we explain to the courts that under these circumstances, the player must have known what he's doing. And so far we have won all our cases that have been decided by courts so far. So it's fundamentally important to look at this specific topic. And we have some 400 plus court cases pending. We settle a lot of them, but we also risk judgments where we believe it makes sense, and this is working very well. From the procedure situation, there's a big difference in Germany. I understand that there are already some higher decisions in Austria, negative ones against the operators. In Germany, we're still at the very beginning. We're still in the first instance of the 3 possible instances at court. So it will be interesting how the second instance or third instance decides, but it will probably take some 2 or 3 years until we know more precisely what will come out in the end. But I'm optimistic that we'll finally succeed and prevent a similar situation like in Austria.
So for a lot of people, when we discuss this topic, there is a bit of surprise that this situation has even been created, because the logic is if you're playing and you're winning and you're being paid your winnings, you shouldn't be able to claim your losses, right? It's kind of logical to anyone in the industry. What has the European Court been saying about these judgments?
Okay, thank you, Davinia. So it would be quite nice to have a judgment of the ECJ helping us with the player-friendly jurisprudence of our civil courts, but we don't have that yet, to be honest. It's actually very difficult to get referrals to the ECJ before German courts. But what you say is right. When you look at the past jurisprudence of the ECJ on the German monopoly, indeed, it may cause a bit surprise, because over the past 12 years, there were a number of judgments in favor of the industry concerning the sports betting monopoly, starting with Carmen Media, Avalon, Inter. You may have heard of these judgments, and they have been indeed quite critical and helped the industry in the regulatory space. Unfortunately, the German highest courts in the regulatory area, including the Federal Administrative Court, in a judgment of 2017, held and interpreted these judgments of the ECJ very restrictive when it comes to Germany. And this is actually one of the points we're also struggling with in the litigation. It's the specifically also this judgment of the Federal Administrative Court of 2017, where many courts still refer to, saying that the restrictions that have been in place comply with EU law. Still, obviously, it's in the regulatory space, it's still important to keep the EU law in mind. But I think in the player claim cases, unfortunately, we have still to score that point with the ECJ.
Christian, I'm going to turn on you again.
Yes.
What have operators been doing to de-risk in these, it's a hostile environment to be operating in. So the ones who have not withdrawn from the markets yet, what are they doing?
Maybe I can just say 2 words about the ECJ first, if you agree.
Sure.
We had one of the most recent judgments was the one with Fluctus and Fluentum, and the line of argumentation justifying the offering of operators in Austria was always based on the freedom to provide services granted by EU law. So a very strong focus was on the advertising activities of the monopolist in Austria. And unfortunately, very recently, we had to learn from ECJ that there is nothing such as absolute limits when thinking of advertising, but it's an overall assessment that needs to be taken into account. And furthermore, we had to learn as well that I think they turned on the Lamborghini, if I'm right. And furthermore, the ECJ clarified that it's not a violation of the freedom to provide services if the advertising activity is aiming to encourage active participation in games of chance. We were very surprised about that, obviously not too happy. What can operators do now? I told you bad news so far. There's consistent more and more case law telling us that the Austrian monopoly is not violating EU law. So what we do when clients onboard with us, we do an overall assessment and of their current situation. What products are they offering? How long are they offering in Austria? What structure of players do they have? And then together with our clients, we try to figure out the best way forward, like re-evaluating their offering, analyzing their customer base, maybe introduce things like stake limits to somehow limit risk exposure, and also to put in place processes and strategy, obviously also to be re-evaluated on a regular basis, how to best handle player claims in an efficient way.
Matthias, can you weigh in on this, perhaps, from your experience from operators in the German market?
Yeah, in terms of the risk exposure, of course, there are several aspects. One side, of course, and I'm probably telling the obvious here, is in terms of from the litigation side of things. Of course, you have to plan and be smart about a litigation strategy you pursue in these player claims, meaning it might not be sensible to really follow through with all cases, but of course look for cases where, and that has been indicated before, where you probably could argue that the player was willful and intentionally playing and being aware of the restrictions in the country, which is an argument that has been accepted by some of our civil courts already. Another, and now I'm kind of returning to the more broader picture, another point looking into the future is, of course, adjusting to the regulation and applying for licenses. We think that, and this may be kind of the silver lining for Germany in terms of the risks from player claims, that over time, with the development of the regulated market, both in sports betting, where the regulation is more ahead than in virtual slots and poker. The regulated market will help reduce the overall exposure from player claims because on the one side we have the statute of limitations, of course, for these claims, but on the other side we think that the whole regulated environment will deter player claims as well. So we think that the overall trend towards the regulated market will help as well.
Do you think that Germany passing a new gambling treaty will make a difference? Maybe comment on that?
Yes, I mean, that will make a big difference because the main argument in the civil law cases at the moment is that players claim that during the unregulated time, the gambling contracts were allegedly void. We don't think that is actually true, but the civil courts so far have mostly followed this argument, and then there's an unjust enrichment claim. But this argument will go away in a licensed environment. There may be other issues that come up with licenses, maybe if there's technical issues with the settlement of bets or an operator not 100% complying with player protection requirements. There may be potentially other cases in the future, but the exposure from player claims is likely to be much smaller.
Claus, do you agree? Will it make a difference? Germany passing the new gambling treaty, will it make a difference?
This is a typical questions that many clients ask me, and I give them in general a very positive outlook. I believe this has a positive impact now, as Matthias also pointed out, gambling contracts will not be considered as void anymore, but valid. And I believe this will reduce also the appetite of players asking back for their money for the past. So I think it will have a positive impact. Of course, the decisions, second, third instance court decisions will impact the development as well. But in general, I look at this rather in an optimistic way.
We're almost out of time. Christian, last comments?
Maybe very recent developments we see is, for instance, we see kind of process cost finances. I think that's also an issue in Germany, being more and more present. This leads me back to what you said before. They are very, very present in media, so it kind of becomes public knowledge that there is something like the possibility to claim back gaming losses. And against this background, unfortunately, the legal situation in Austria is not that clear. We are missing one very decisive paragraph, unfortunately. But still, one could question, is the law and is justice there to protect people that voluntarily enter into a contract, knowing that in case they lose, they will claim back funds and claim this contract to be nil and void. So at least if the law and the court does not help, but still obviously we will try to bring forward this argument, but maybe operators will need to find some kind of solution to exchange that information and to be aware what type of customer is onboarding with them or who they have in their customer base.